Welcome to the Healthy Relationships Initiative podcast. Our goal is to provide information and tools to help you build happier, healthier, and safer relationships of all kinds. To learn more about HRI, please visit www.guilfordhri.org and check us out on social media at GuilfordHRI.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Healthy Relationships Initiative Relationship Booster. These programs are free online relationship education programs where we talk with local experts on different topics. Our mission with the Healthy Relationships Initiative is to promote happy, healthy, and safe relationships of all kinds in Guilford County and beyond. And we really encourage you to check out our website at guilfordhri.org if you'd like to learn more about our work and connect to more of our resources and programs, as well as connect with us on social media at GuilfordHRI. Just a few comments before we get started. If you have any questions, you can submit them through the chat room, and we encourage you to do so. We will either take questions at the end, or if they're connected to something that we're talking about, we'll take them during the program itself. And before you sign off, we'd invite you to please fill out our feedback form at the end of the program, because we're always looking to get information to help us improve our programs moving forward. Today's Healthy Relationships Initiative Relationship Booster is going to be on the topic of easing K-12 school transitions. My name is Christine Murray, and I'm the director of the Healthy Relationships Initiative, and I'm also a professor in the counseling department at UNC Greensboro. And today we are joined by our special guest, Dr. Karen Meadows. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
And we're super excited to have Karen here with us. She's a real expert on this topic and brings a wealth of experience in different school counseling roles. And so, Karen, would you share a little bit about your background and especially maybe why you were interested in this particular topic?
Oh, gosh. So I started, we were talking earlier, I actually started in finance. And so I came back to school. I started as a middle school counselor. I did 2 years, and then I opened a new middle school as a third year counselor.
Oh, wow.
So I always say that was like 3 years in 1 year, opening a new school. So I worked there for about 8 to 10 years, and then I transitioned to a district position where I supervised elementary and middle school counselors. And so I did that for another 10 years, and I've recently gone back to a high school. So this is completing my first year. So just a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, and you've really just worked at every level within the school system,
every level,
elementary, middle, high school.
Yes, and different initiatives. I think those types of experiences are very important. So I was the contact for bullying prevention for the district. Crisis, I served as a crisis team leader for our district. Suicide interventions, I've led those trainings for our district. So the role is really complex and varied.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like you've had a lot of school transitions yourself.
I have.
So bring that perspective.
I can bring some from my own personal experience.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm so excited to learn from you as a parent myself who deals with school transitions a lot, but also we know that these are challenges that really and experiences that impact a lot of families in our community and beyond. So right now, when we're taping this program, and some people may watch it later, it's the middle of summer, so a lot of people are maybe trying to put school out of their mind for the time being. But we, of course, have the school year coming up, and I'm sure there are a lot of families who are really starting to think about the coming school year and what changes might be ahead. So different types of transitions. It might be starting a new school, even just changing grades. It could be also moving to a different level of school, so whether it's starting kindergarten for the first time or that transition of moving up to middle school or high school. It's just a lot of transitions that can happen in the schools.
And what I've experienced, it's really just the unknown. People are fearful of just the unknown. They anticipate maybe scenarios or thoughts that may not necessarily be true. I often say, what story are you telling yourself? What are you thinking of? And so that's in any type of transition. So a lot of the stress is just because you're fearful of what might happen. And so a lot of times when I'm trying to help families, it's all about disseminating information. and let's really think through this and kind of chunk it and break it down to see what's at the core of the fear about change or transition.
So in many ways, it's kind of stepping out of what's been familiar to you and into a new environment. And I can really relate to that because my older son just started middle school last year.
Yes.
And so not knowing what that was going to be like and having been really familiar in the elementary school environment and sort of knowing that, the teachers, what the schedule's like, that transition was really difficult because it was moving into something. But it sounds like you're saying kind of not having a lot of information can add to the stress. Right. But if you get more information about the transition, then that can be very helpful.
It can help reduce it, I think, because you have to really try to zero in on what is the root cause or where is the anxiety or angst coming from with the transition. Because we're going to always have transitions, whether it's school, life, you name it. And so I try to use the same process no matter what the transition is. I've transitioned before, I survived, and so I try to remember that.
Right.
You'll survive again. You'll do fine.
Yeah. And how do you think parents experience that different from their children? And it might depend on how old the child is. But
I think for students particularly in our secondary, especially elementary, middle school, high school, they look more at the social part of transitioning. I think that's where their anxiety may come from, if there's anxiety. Developmentally, having a sense of belonging and peer interactions and connections are huge. They're critical. I think parents are looking more at, I would say, the logistics, for lack of a better word. Where are you going? Who are your teachers? What classes do you have in what order, going to and from school. And so I think it's a little bit different than students. Often when I worked at a middle school, we would do orientation and we would say, we're going to start with the number one concern. Where's the lunchroom? And so everybody would just breathe, because the students, they were concerned about the lunchroom and PE in the locker room. And so once we got that out of the way, then we could really give them information and they could hear us better.
Yeah, and I would think for parents, that's helpful to keep in mind that your child or your children might have a very different set of concerns and things.
Absolutely.
And so you might be really worried about those logistical pieces, the schedule, who do you talk to, what's the teacher going to be like, and for parents to keep that piece in mind, that the social piece, they might be most worried about not just where is the lunchroom, but who am I going to sit with at lunch? And that could be keeping them up at night almost if they're really worried about that.
So the thought of isolation, I'm not going to know anyone, will I have friends, will I keep my old friends? Yeah. Will I know anyone in my classes? Just walk in the halls. That's like a whole social environment in itself. Yeah. And so it really impacts their day. Yeah. And so we, as a school counselor, I feel like those are the things that we're most helpful with, even if it's just a listening ear, that I understand and no concern is too small. Right. I get it. Yeah. But let's see what we can do to work through it.
And I think a lot of times maybe parents don't realize how important those pieces are for the student and from their perspective.
Yes, very
important. For parents to really remember that is important. So other things in terms of socially, and maybe we could even think about it at different age groups. So for an elementary school student, a younger child who's facing a transition, what, aside from the social aspect, what other pieces of it might be stressful for them?
I think just maybe the physical change, the physical environment, or being familiar, or not knowing the building. At that age, if you move from middle school, sometimes it can be a huge building. There are lots of different hallways. You may move from one teacher, 2 teachers, to 4 teachers. Some even have 6. So I think just the physical navigation might be more of a concern in addition to the social piece that we can definitely help. Opening your locker, that's huge. I remember we spent a whole week in middle school about opening your locker. It's fine. And in high school, it's some of the same things. They're a little more mature about it. They may respond differently, but they still are not quite sure, like, where do I go? And so we are very different with our ninth graders as well. Even though, you know, they're young adults, they still have fear of, I don't know where to go, I don't know when to go, I don't know what the day is going to be like.
And at that age, too, maybe especially even afraid to ask about help because they don't want to, they want to look like they have it all figured out. Or they don't want to be embarrassed to admit to their friends that they're really worried, how am I going to find my next class?
Exactly. So we always try to find ways, well, I call it, where students can do self-help. So if you don't know something, I say you can go to the website, or you can email me, or you can read it on the TV announcement, or this is listed here. So they can decide when they want the information, and it can even be, no one has to know.
Right, so giving them ways to get the information that they need and ease that. So it seems like in general, in terms of kind of what's stressful about it, and for what parents can really keep in mind is just to try to talk with your child and ask them what is it that's most, you know, most on your mind about this upcoming change, and how can I support you through that?
Yes, and I think parents don't ask that question enough. And sometimes I think at this age, too, especially as high school, they are not as verbal, and even middle school. So I say do a writing exercise, like do a list of maybe what your concerns are, how you'd like it to be, what you think is going to happen, and then you can connect those pieces.
Yeah, and that's a great, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but these transitions are good kind of training ground for life skills that they'll use, because really it's similar if you were starting a new job and what that would look like, and how do you find your office, and how do you know what time you take lunch. And, you know, those are the kinds of things that even as adults sometimes, like, I don't know how to do these things when we're entering new environments. So by teaching them a skill, I love that idea of, like, let's write down a list and let's map out a plan, and maybe even sharing, you know, and by the way, when I started my last job, I did the exact same thing because I was also worried about similar things.
And parents, they can do their own list of the child's transition. It's really about communicating and lowering the anxiety level, and I think students need to realize that adults, we feel it too. And they need to feel listened to. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and I think too, I was one other thing that just comes to my mind would be maybe for parents, if they're having their own concerns about certain logistical issues, especially kind of sort of bigger picture things, maybe to try not to talk about their own concerns as much with their child, because if the child's already dealing with some stress and anxiety about certain things, you know, they don't necessarily
want to
add on extra worries. That's not to say parents shouldn't get their own support for that, or even maybe be open about certain pieces of it, but to try to give a real calm presence so that the child knows and can feel sort of more confident going through that transition.
A professor that I interviewed, I was asking him about my own research, and he told me, which resonates with me, it's really about how you tell the story. It's really about how you respond. You can have the angst, you can go to the school, but how are you interacting? You know, what are your concerns? Are you being demanding? Are you just asking for information? Are you doing your due diligence? You know, you have to go to the website. You need to email. You need to find out. And because it's hard for the school to get to you if we don't have a link or a way to communicate.
Yeah. And I think, too, parents can even use that as an opportunity to be a good role model for the child and think, well, you know, I'm a little concerned about where I'm going to pick you up in the morning, or what the bus situation is going to be.
So let's find out
let's
beforehand.
Find out. Let's figure out, who do we need to call, or let's look at a website and maybe to handle it in a more calm, problem-solving manner, and then that is a good role model. So in terms of, we know these transitions can be challenging, but from your perspective, what does a really positive, sort of successful transition in the school system look like for students?
Well, I think being prepared. I always laugh. I say we have the first day of school every year. It's typically around the same time. So you can be prepared.
Yeah.
And that comes with, you don't have to wait to do everything the first week of school. You can start sooner. Schools, we're working now, we're preparing the schedules, I'm making phone calls so I can communicate ahead of time. Parents can do the same thing. I wouldn't say bombard the school because we are working and we're trying to complete information, but you can email, you can do your own homework, you can review their website, you can see if there are different types of distribution lists that you can join. For instance, we have an email distribution list. You just sign up and you're part of the pool. There are remind groups that you can join so the school disseminates information. I think really being able to communicate and know what's coming is very helpful.
Yeah, and the more you can do ahead of the actual transition,
right?
Because I was just thinking one thing that I've really appreciated as a parent is getting the school supply list far ahead of time.
Right.
So that's something you can take care of earlier so that it's not, oh gosh, we're frantically running the night before open house to go get all these notebooks and pencils and things like that, because we've got that taken care of.
Exactly.
And that does help to ease the transition.
It
so
does.
Getting as much done ahead of time. And being as prepared as possible.
Even as small as just putting dates on the calendar.
Yeah.
So you can go ahead, we have the calendar for the whole year. Book spring break, see when you're off, when you have vacation. Not when you have vacation, see when you're off, when we have teacher work days.
Right.
All of those to me can just give you a sense of direction about, okay, we have a plan for the year, we can move forward. Even the reading list, most schools have those, you know, so read the book now, don't wait.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
That helps is kind of being prepared so that when you come, there's always going to be any changes can be stressful and difficult, but the more you've kind of taken care of it ahead of time, you go into it, you feel ready, maybe even a little bit ahead of schedule in certain areas, definitely seems good. And I heard you also say earlier, when you do then come across something that you're not sure, find the answer. So don't be afraid to ask questions, whether you're the parent or if you're the student. If a student's concerned about something, then say, well, who can we ask at the school? And who can we find that out? That seems like part of that successful transition too.
And one question that I get at every level is like, when does school start? And when does it end? And you can get that information. Like, you don't have to suffer the entire summer. You can find it out and have a plan. You can get your bus transportation squared away. So I often say, you know, that first day and first week of school, it should be fun. You know, you should enjoy it. You should look forward to it. And if you have all of these last-minute things, I think it increases your anxiety because we have the entire school coming back. So counselors are not readily available. We have probably a long line. You kind of have to wait your turn, or we have to call you back late at night. So the sooner you can get the information, the better.
Yeah, and it just seems like it would start in a calm place. So it seems like kind of this idea of control the controllables. Like when there's something that's under your control and you can find it out and that sort of thing. And certainly sometimes you can't control certain pieces of it, but the more that you can kind of say, okay, this is what we're going to do, even maybe, you know, I think at the family sort of parenting level too, you know, let's look at, okay, so when we know what the first day of school is and we know what that looks like, let's make sure we're not overly committed to other things that week. You know, let's not do play dates with friends that week or plan a trip out of town that first weekend. You know?
And you're coming back the night before school starts.
It's just going to make everybody's going to be tired and you're stressed out. And so, you know, just really being, it sounds like just a successful transition in many ways is just being proactive. And
I'm big on organization and preparing as much as you can. I don't think you should be overly prepared because then if it doesn't work out the way you think, we don't want anyone to have a breakdown. But just prepare as much as you can and be as organized as you can and get some rest. You know, rest, get sleep, water, all of that matters. And map out your schedule. Everybody should have it on their calendars. Do reminders to yourself so that you don't forget. Open house is huge. I think everyone should attend. We prepare so much for open house.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can meet your students' teachers, you can see the building, you can see other students.
Yeah.
So that's huge. Sometimes parents forget to schedule that in.
Yeah, and I think sometimes too, even parents can feel like, well, we're at the same, we haven't changed schools,
Right.
so we don't need to go to open house. But in a way, it's going back to what we were talking about earlier, where your child or your teenager might have different concerns,
That's
you know,
right.
so even though you might know the logistics of, I know where that teacher's classroom is.
Right. You don't know all your teachers.
Yeah, and just
yeah.
to give that, it's like that preview
Right.
opportunity for the student and for the parent.
Yeah.
You go in, meet people, talk with them. I've found personally as a parent, a lot of times when I go to the open houses, I end up realizing I have a lot of questions that I didn't even
know. Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes you hear other parents ask questions, and so those are helpful because you didn't think of those. And the teachers, they want to meet you.
Yeah.
It's very helpful.
And I think the older your students get, the less opportunities you'll have during the regular school year to interact with the teacher. So those become even more important.
That's
even
right.
you might feel like, we're in 8th grade, we've been to these 2 open houses before. But really just seeing that's a great opportunity to get to know the new teachers and know the new hallway that they're going to be in and, you know, those opportunities.
And even the schedule, as hard as we work, we're human.
Yeah.
And so sometimes there's errors, and sometimes getting your schedule and walking it reflects the error.
Oh,
and so you can figure that out, and we can get it cleared up before the first day of school.
And so much less stressful to do it before that first day versus to discover something and just
when you get off the bus.
Yeah.
Right.
We see it even at the university level.
I know.
You know, where we'll get the first week of classes, you just have students walking by, where's this class? What room am I in? And, you know, that planning is something
so
that, and really, again, you're kind of, from a parenting perspective, beyond just that immediate transition, when you're doing those things, you're showing your child, you're role modeling for them, and you're helping them to learn basic sort of life skills that help them when they face other transitions, like whether it's school or something else. But it's more stressful when you leave so many things open to chance.
It is.
In a way.
And I always tell parents and students, you really have to advocate for yourself, especially when they transition to college. You can't just sit and say, well, no one called me.
Right.
Be proactive. You know, you look, if you see something, say something. I know that's more social, but it's the suicide part. But say something and ask and look for and go to. So all of those are helpful.
Yeah. I think, too, as much as it sounds like you are as much a fan of good organization as I am in general.
Maybe too much sometimes.
Yeah, me too. But it sounds like, you know, as much as that's really helpful, and we know that as much planning and preparation, I think another piece of it probably is a successful transition is when you've accepted some level of uncertainty and just to be able to kind of tell yourself, you know, for the first week or two, or even the first month, or even maybe the first year in a new school, there's just going to be new things, and to kind of just accept that and remind yourself that it's okay if you feel a little disorganized or a little uneasy or uncertain, because some things you don't find out until halfway through the school year because there's a new something that happens and it's a change. And
it's a process. When you're new, you don't know everything, and you're going to learn it, but you may learn it slowly, and that's fine. The whole grade level's typically new.
Right.
So just walk through it. If you don't know something, ask someone or try to find out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, you're never alone. There's always somebody at the school who can help you, or maybe it's another parent that can help you, or another student who knows and who can help you. So if parents and students are struggling to know to reach out, is a really big part of that. So we've already talked a little bit about this, but do you have any other sort of practical strategies that you would suggest for parents to help their children or their students have a successful school transition?
I can't, communication. You've got to talk and listen to really kind of find out what's going on, because it could even change over the summer. Even when students get their schedules, and maybe they don't get the perfect schedule that they anticipated. That's another level. That might be another discussion. And like you said, just accepting that, you know, things aren't going to be perfect, but you'll be fine. Unless it's a real error, a wrong class, you can just work through that and figure it out. You know, students compare their schedules and oh, you got so-and-so, even the teacher you receive. Sometimes poor teachers, they have reputations, and sometimes students go in already saying, like, oh, my God. And it turns out sometimes it's not like that at all. So I would say really just communication, whatever works best for you and your student or students that you find successful, finding ways for it to listen and to also talk.
Yeah, so having that ongoing conversation, and it can be hard because especially for different reasons, I guess, for younger kids and older kids. Yeah, sometimes they're not always, if you say, well, how was your day? They're like, it was fine. You know, that's it. That's all you're going to get. But, you know, just having ongoing, open conversations with them. Maybe you ask it right after. It's not when they're both wanting to talk. But maybe there are other times if you get out and just are taking a walk or something, and that might be, oh, this happened at school. Let's talk about this and how you feel. And even I think for parents too, probably to just say, you know, I just want you to know if anything comes up, or if you ever need any help, or you need to talk about anything, just know I'm always here. You can probably not remind your child that too much.
I think the more informal environments are actually the best. You know, if you're doing something else, it can come up in conversation. If you see something, that's a great teaching moment. You can find a way to weave it in, especially with our young men. Sometimes they're not as verbal. So they can be playing basketball or doing something else, and you guys can have somewhat of a conversation.
Yeah, I find a lot of times with my sons, the immediate question, the sort of direct question of, well, how was school today? Oh, it's fine. What did you do? What did you learn? The same thing. But then later in the day, or a couple of days later, it's like, oh, this happened. And oh, why didn't you tell me that earlier when I asked that? But that's okay. They'll kind of tell you in their own time. If you have that good foundation, which you said, to make sure you have the foundation that the child can see that you're present for them. They know that they can talk to you and share things that are going on. And for parents to really be open to it. And sometimes you have to be more specific in your questions.
Like I always tell parents, and we laugh about it in conferences, they'll say, well, I asked them if they did their homework, and I say, you know the answer will always be yes. It'll never be, oh, no, I didn't do it, typically. So you have to say, let me see your homework. Let me review your homework. Let's follow up. So you have to not ask just generic questions.
And for parents, too, just kind of similarly, if your child brings home a planner, to look at it every day. I know sometimes my one son, he never writes in his planner, but I still look at it and sign it every day. One of these days there might be something in there, and then at least he knows and the teacher knows that whether he's writing
anything. He's going to look.
But I mean, that's another way to get information. Don't just, you get a lot of paperwork as a parent,
you
know, and there's a lot of information coming at you. It can start to feel overwhelming, and sometimes when parents get overwhelmed, they're just like, forget it, I'm not going to look at anything. But just to take that few minutes to look through the papers, stay on top of things, because really you can find a lot of times things that your child may not say directly to you, but that you can get the information.
You can see it, or see a pattern. And being consistent, I think sometimes we underestimate that too. Just students need to know they need some type of structure, and they need to know that there's going to be some follow-up, whatever that is. So I may say no, but I know somebody's going to check next week, or they may communicate with my teacher. And so even if a student maybe doesn't feel as comfortable saying something, sometimes they're really happy that you're going to follow up. Because it relieves some pressure.
They know that somebody's looking out for them.
They have a support system.
So let's shift gears a little bit, because now we've been talking about what a successful, positive transition looks like. But let's talk about challenges. So what would be some things? Let's say there's a student who is really anxious about some transition.
Mm-hmm.
Even maybe once the transition happens and there's still
Mm-hmm.
a lot of anxiety about that. What would your recommendation be for that when there's a lot of anxiety around a particular transition, maybe starting a new school or a new grade?
Well, I look at it in two ways. I look at it through the social, emotional lens type way. Are they emotional about feelings or peers or what's going to happen? Are they more scared about, I physically don't know where I'm going, I've never been there, I'm unsure about that? Do they even feel like inadequate? You know, do they feel underprepared?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be the only one that doesn't know whatever, X, Y, Z. And so you really have to kind of hone in to see kind of which one it is. It could be all three.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you figure that out, there are ways to me that you can support whatever the need is, whether it's, if they're unsure, visit the school. You know, you can take tours, you can walk around, you can get familiar. If they're concerned about not knowing anyone, try to connect with others before school starts.
Right.
You know, in the neighborhood, friends. I know a lot of students do magnet schools, so they're not attending the school in their neighborhood. You can call and see if there are ways to connect, you know, before school starts.
Right.
So they at least know someone.
Yeah.
Or feel like they'll know someone.
So even just having that one friend or that one familiar face can be really helpful.
And I think, again, walking through what the unknown looks like and not always anticipating the worst.
Right. Mm-hmm.
To put on my counseling hat, I always tell students you really have to learn self-talk, and you have to talk yourself off the ledge sometimes.
Yeah.
And you can figure out what works for you. You know,
and sometimes it might be role playing that too.
Exactly.
So what is the worst case scenario that you're really afraid of, like walking into a lunchroom and you don't know anybody and there's nowhere to sit?
Right.
Okay.
What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? Let's talk about that. Let's
That's
write that down. What are a few things you might do?
That's right.
You know, do you just go sit wherever? Do you go, you know, what do you,
do you
like,
leave?
do you leave?
Right.
Do you go find a teacher that you've maybe connected with earlier in the day, or, you know, just what are some things you can do, or what are some words you could use if you go up to a table and say, can I sit in this chair, you know, and just to not feel completely helpless in that moment.
That's right.
So that they can say, even if you've got a child who's really shy, that still might be anxiety provoking for them, but even if they practice saying, can I sit in this chair?
That's right.
And then what if the answer is no? Okay, I'm going to go find another chair.
Right.
You know, how do I do that? And, like, you know, to kind of walk through some of those situations really can go a long way too.
It can, because a lot of it is mental, our mental state.
Yeah.
And we're just afraid of what might happen. And it might happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But then, okay, so what? So let's figure that out and try to move forward. Let's find another group. Let's have another plan.
Yeah. I like that too, like kind of what's the backup plan. So let's say you literally, nobody is friendly to you in the cafeteria at all.
Or everyone has their earbuds in.
Yeah.
Like they didn't even hear you say hello. You thought they ignored you and they didn't hear you.
Yeah, that's true. And it might mean then, okay, plan B is let's go talk to a teacher, or let's talk to the school counselor, or let's, you know, find somebody who can maybe come into, maybe not with you, but be watching what happens and help you through that more directly. You know, and I think, again, not to kind of repeat this too much, but I think that this is just, to me, an important thing for parents to remember, that these are life skills, you know, and that's something that learning to go into uncomfortable situations, thinking through how you might handle different scenarios, what do you do if it gets to be a little bit worse of a problem. Those are things that we can learn that happens for the rest of your life.
That's right. That's right. And you really have to just learn how to navigate, and you will continue to learn. You may conquer one, and then something else happens, and it looks a little bit different or completely different. But I always try to remember, and I tell students this too, you know, what happened the last time? I mean, you're still here, the sun came up the next
Right.
day.
Yeah.
The world is still revolving. So sometimes we just have to tackle our own fears in a different way.
Right. Yeah. And I do think too, I think sometimes parents probably can help the students themselves, but we do know about the raising rates of anxiety and depression among teenagers and adolescents and even younger. So it might be helpful for those who are listening to this who aren't familiar, who know in general about counseling, but could you speak a little bit about if there was a student that had anxiety, is that something a school counselor would help with, or how would a school counselor maybe help connect them to another counselor in the community if there was some really significant anxiety?
So the first thing I would say is please communicate with the teacher, the counselor, even an administrator.
Okay.
Like, don't wait. I think a lot of times parents are too kind. You know, they don't want to bother anyone, or they think they can handle it. But we often see very different things in school.
That's right.
Your student at home may be really different in large groups, and so that whole group dynamic can shift lots of things. School counselors, we're certainly certified and licensed to work with anxiety. We just have different parameters in a school.
Right.
So we can't diagnose, we can't do long-term therapy in a school. So we can help in the school setting, giving strategies to the student while they're in school, even at home. If it continues, then that's our role to actually refer out. So we will try to find you resources so you can be better equipped and have maybe some more long-standing assistance.
Right. So in many ways, school counselors are a great kind of starting point resource for many students and families because the school counselor is trained to assess what's going on and understand maybe what level of anxiety we've got here. Is this something that a few opportunities to talk through and learning some skills will help, or is this kind of beyond that scope and it might require something longer term?
Right, because we understand the symptomology of it. We just can't always address it on a long-term basis, or the severity of it may be too severe for the school. So I always give a comparison, which helps me. You think of even a school nurse. So she may know the signs of if a student has cancer or something, but there's only so much she could do in a school setting. Or even if they break a leg, she knows it's broken. She can help, but they've got to be transitioned out of the school to really deal with that.
X-ray and get the cast on.
Right, it's just too big for the school setting. So we're kind of there, and we know the school, we know other students. So we can often connect students with other students. A lot of times students don't know, 15 other students came feeling the same way.
Right, they feel isolated because they're just think they're the only one.
The only one. And so those are the things where the school counselor really is unique in making those assessments and helping with the connection.
And I think that's a great point about reaching out early, and especially keeping in mind that point that as a parent, you're seeing one part of the story at school, and it could be better or worse at home or school.
That's
it
it
could
depends.
be this student's maybe really struggling in school, or there's a lot of social peer challenges going on in that school environment, and the child's not talking about it at home. They seem flexible. Or sometimes children are misbehaving a lot at home, and everything's great at school too. So but that's helpful to see what's different about those different environments.
And just remember, there are always multiple perspectives, and typically you can't get one perspective. You can't get all the perspectives from one person.
Right.
You've got to talk to the team.
Yeah, and I would think in many ways, I know for a lot of parents, they know how to find a counselor in the community or may already have their child in a counselor, so they may not feel the need to go speak with the school counselor, but it seems like it would be helpful if their child is struggling with some sort of transition to even check in with the school counselor.
Absolutely.
Because there might be things that are happening at school that...
Right, and there are things we see in the halls. I think we talked about this earlier. In a school setting, you wear lots of hats. You're on hall duty, you're in cafeteria duty, morning duty, carpool, I mean, you name it. So just watching the interactions in the hallway, sometimes you can't tell. You may notice something, but you're not sure. But I always tell teachers it's like putting a puzzle together. if you see something, tell me, because I might have seen something, and then the parent may have seen something, but they were all isolated events.
Right.
But when we put it together, we're like, oh, we may have an issue.
Yeah.
But if you don't know, right.
Too, because that I think is another important piece, and we talk about this a lot in training family counselors, that a lot of times in families and individuals too, a transition point is going to be stressful for people, and problems can happen. But when those transitions aren't managed well, or there's problems that come up and they're not resolved right away, they just grow bigger and bigger. And so the more you're, again, proactive, but also kind of connecting with other people who can have their eyes on the situation and be supporting a child in a different way, I think it's the more helpful it can be.
I think you have to be open-minded as well, and again, asking more probing questions. So you're not jumping to conclusions. And you're really figuring out, let me think and process and do more listening. Like you were saying, sometimes you can just run across something and see it. Yeah, so we don't, what I hate is when I feel like a student has suffered, and I just wish you would have said something. You know, you don't, and students, especially in high school, you know, they want to handle it on their own often, or their friends. That's their healthy group. Those are their physicians. My friend told me, I'm like, probably wouldn't have done that, you know.
I know. So in addition to school counselors and even counselors in the community, are there other resources or professionals that you could see that are good sources of support for families going through these sort of school transitions?
I think some other, I say school counselors are unsung heroes sometimes, but another group are social workers. Every school has a social worker, and they might not have a full-time here in Guilford County, but they are very skilled, and they have even more access to community resources because they're out in the community or doing home visits. Their whole role is to connect the families and their whole social services environment. Social workers, and then every school has a school psychologist as well. Their role is a little bit different, but they are a resource to assist with these type of things.
And then also just a lot of good resources in the community potentially. And I would say too, in today's day and age, I think connecting with your child's school on social media and, you know, like you mentioned earlier, getting on the email list and things like that, but just making sure you're connected and getting information from a lot of different ways can probably help too. I think social media, especially when it comes to transitions, can be really helpful because a lot of schools are really good about, that's where they put reminders about upcoming dates or different events and things, and it's a nice way to just get connected. Even one thing that I'll do with my kids' schools is follow them on Facebook, and then you can go in under the follow and get there first. So you know you're getting that. So even just that simple little step, but that then helps me feel more like I'm getting that information, and I know when I look, it's going to be one of the first things that I see. So that can be helpful too.
It is, and that's like one of the #1 comments I get from parents. I didn't know, or I'm getting it now. I mean, parents are coming in. I got it yesterday. They're enrolling students. And so she was like, well, why don't y'all do such and such? I said, we did this like 10 times. We had it on the announcements. We did a connected. We sent it in the email distribution list. We send it to the Remind. The students got it in homeroom. I said, they just don't bring it home to you. So you can stay connected. Like you don't have to go through them all the time.
Especially middle school, high school, where it's not, you're not getting the Monday folder coming home with all those flyers and everything. But for parents, that often does mean taking that extra first step. But if you do it ahead of time or right as the school year starting, you're kind of getting ahead through that. So let's talk. Did we have any questions that have come in, or any questions?
Sure. Actually, a question on this topic. What should parents consider looking outside of the school for help, especially when we're talking about high school students who might have some struggles that they are not always vocal to their parents about?
So when you
when should parents consider reaching outside of the schools for help? So for counselors and therapy and
you really have to try to determine the severity level. I would say if it's impacting multiple facets of a child's life, to me that's like a red flag. Or if you see a huge shift in behavior, that's another red flag where it might be a little more deep-seated than you thought.
Yeah.
If you see any type of drastic changes, even if the mood is all of a sudden euphoric, like that's a red flag as well. So if you think it's affecting maybe multiple areas, if it's stopping maybe the functioning of something, where they're really not managing like they think they are, you may want to look outside.
Yeah. Also maybe too, even kind of to add to that, I think those are all good signs. And then also like maybe even if just your child used to speak a lot more to you and then maybe they're just quiet, you know, they're not, there's maybe even not any red flags, but even just sometimes kids just need somebody to talk to, but they don't know that they do, or they're not comfortable saying that they do. So even just kind of, if you feel like they're not really talking to anyone, at least an adult, because that was such a good point you made about their peer group is their advisor, you know, and that's like, oh, you know,
like their counsel,
right? I know, yeah, it could be good, but it's like, well, you know, and I think you can talk to them about it and say like, well, let's think about that, you know, like on the one hand, they understand what you're going through, they're there, you're good friends, you know, they care about you, and on the other hand, you know, they don't have some of the life experience too, so it's good to have an adult, and sometimes even a counselor can serve that purpose too, even if it's not a crisis, but just someone to talk things through that they might not feel comfortable talking about with their parents.
And that's a great point, because even when we do assessments for suicidality, we really look at the level of isolation.
Yeah.
Like, does the student have any confidant? Do they feel that there's anyone they could reach out to? And sometimes if that's missing, it really changes how you behave, or how you might respond to something.
Yeah, because that's the need for everybody to have that connection.
That's right.
Yeah, definitely. Any other questions? No? Okay, great. Well, I've got another question.
Okay.
And we have really talked about this kind of off and on, but I do think these transitions in school can really be good learning opportunities for how to handle transitions just in general in life. And some people are naturally better at handling transitions and others aren't, but how do you think are there things that parents can do sort of intentionally to help students take kind of some of these lessons that they're teaching them about how to handle these transitions and then generalize it to the bigger picture life lessons that parents try to teach their children?
And I do it for myself. So I have tried to start the practice of doing something that I don't know how to do intentionally, whether it's working out or joining a group or learning something new, something where I don't know, I'm unaware. I don't know how to do it, or a group that I don't know anyone, and joining other type of either athletic groups or community groups, service learning, doing any activity where you're not always comfortable. I think is critical. And that, to me, I do the same with my niece. I'm like, you've got to get out of your comfort zone, or you will never learn that you're going to be resilient. That you can work through it.
Intentionally
do something.
Out changes.
Yes.
And seeking out things that push you outside of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. Because sometimes you have to know what it feels like to be the new person. Or know what it feels like to not really know, and then you navigate, and it's a confidence booster sometimes. If you've done something, even as adults, if we've been in a role so long, we forget to even tell new people some of those nuances.
Because it becomes comfortable, and
it's just known. And you have to remember, let me see what it feels like to be a novice sometimes, to not know something.
That's a really great idea, and I think it's something that families can do all year, but even just as a family, let's go do something. I remember a few years ago, my sons and I took a karate class together. And like, you know, that was totally new to me. It was very out of my comfort zone. And actually, they picked it up a lot easier than
Yeah.
me. But I think it's a good example of, and I think what I learned from that, and what I hope that I was able to sort of model with them, is that, you know, it's good to try different things, and we might not always like it.
That's right.
We didn't stick with it for too long.
Right.
But, you know, but just kind of getting out of that comfort zone and thinking about that. And so families can even do that, like thinking about transitions. You don't even have to talk about school.
That's right.
But let's go try something different. Let's try like some activity or some class or something that we've not done before.
Right.
And it's going to be a little weird and uncomfortable for all of us.
But let's see how we work through it.
Yeah.
So that's where you develop those skills. I think you develop empathy. You're much more empathetic to different people and different circumstances.
Yeah.
You develop resilience, coping skills. All of those, to me, are embedded in that. And it doesn't take money. You can decide what the new thing is.
Right. And take advantage of a lot of opportunities in the community, whether it's through community centers or even the school district. Like here in our community, I think the school district does a lot of really good things to promote family involvement in the schools and different events and opportunities and things like that. So I love that idea, because I think it's true to help people. And then what I think is really neat is then, as a parent, let's say your student is facing some sort of school transition, you can say, well, you know, you remember that time we took that karate class?
Exactly.
How uncomfortable it was?
Right.
But then after we did it for a month or so, we were like enjoying it, and we felt more comfortable, and we learned things. Like the same thing can happen here. You know, you're going to get more comfortable in this environment, and you're going to feel better about what you can do with it. So. And
I think people are so afraid to fail or not be perfect or good at something.
Yeah.
But it's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how you get better. And teaching that you can not be the best.
Right.
You might be number 9 out of 10, but you're in the group, and that's fine.
Right. Yeah. So really, for parents to keep a positive attitude about change and not putting too many expectations. We didn't really even talk too much about that, but I think most students feel a lot of pressure, like around, I've got to get really good grades, I need straight A's, anything less than straight A's, and, you know, of course we want to have high positive expectations,
right.
But at the same time, that can add a lot of
a lot of pressure. Perfectionism, that is just, we've got to help, especially our young ladies, understand that is just impossible.
Right.
You can do your best and work towards your best, but it's okay if you're not perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, and
even taking rigorous coursework, you know, I'm always encouraging students, but a lot of them, if they don't think they're going to get an A, then they don't want to participate. But I'm like, the experience is where you're going to get your most benefit.
Yeah, and it's almost like parents and other adults need to talk more about students about that, about what you can learn from going through something that's different, or you know, sort of talk with them about, well, what if you got a B in a really hard class compared to an A in an easy
with
class?
With no challenge.
You know, and then just even thinking about, well, what does that look like if you're an NBA player? Like, do you feel good if you beat a, you know, high school basketball team, or would you feel better, like, maybe coming in second in the world, you know, in the championship, you know, compared to like just going and beating an easy team, you know? So it's like helping them to kind of, I think examples like that, they're kind of silly, but at the same time, I think in many ways to them, it's like, oh, that makes sense, you know, and to be okay with taking on challenges is important. Yeah. So before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share on this topic?
Gosh, look, I feel like I've shared so much.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
We have. I think my only final thought is, you know, just really helping families and students realize that they will make it through the transition. Don't make the fear of the unknown worse than the actual transition.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it's fine. And reach out to the schools. Really, I'm a huge proponent of putting information in areas where people can get it themselves, and so you don't have to wait to speak to one person or get the specific counselor. Every school has websites. The counseling departments typically have their own website.
Mm-hmm.
Get on any distribution list if there is, because that's how you can really stay abreast of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. All these kind of practical things that people can do, and I think that my kind of summary of our conversation is just be as proactive as possible. Embrace that there's going to always be some uncertainty, but think about how can you learn and grow through those experiences, and even carry that forward into other areas of your life too. So I've really enjoyed our conversation, especially as a parent. I'm already starting to think about our upcoming school transitions, and honestly, it's always a stressful time, and I'm sure it's a stressful time for parents or for teachers and for school counselors and anybody in the school system too. I mean,
we are very busy right now. People always say, well, what are you doing? And I'm like, what are we not doing? Should be the question.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into it to make those transitions as easy as possible for people. So we want to thank everybody again for being here. Again, if you have a chance before you sign off, please click the form to give us feedback on the program. And our next live program is actually next week at noon on healthy relationships in older adulthood on Wednesday, July 17th. And so we hope you'll join us, and we hope that the information that we've discussed today really helps ease any upcoming school transitions. And I just really want to thank you, Karen. I really enjoyed talking with you today.
I've enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Great.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much.